All right, welcome back. So the title of this mini lecture is The Second World War in Italy. And there's a heck of a lot to know when it comes to understanding the Second World War, and especially in Italy. So we're going to try to narrow it down. We're going to start out by talking about 5 things that you should kind of know or kind of think about when you begin your research into understanding this particular aspect of the war and of the war in the Mediterranean. So the first of these 5 things is going to be the Sicily campaign. All right, so on the heels of the Allied success in North Africa, which had taken a bit longer than what the Allies had hoped for, there was an amphibious operation to land Allied soldiers in Sicily beginning in July of 1943. Now, this was a campaign that lasted about 6 weeks. It was arduous, it was bloody, but by the end of it, the Allies were successful in pushing Italian and German forces off of Sicily and onto the mainland, and preparations for a full-scale invasion of Italy proper began after that. Secondly, the next thing that we should be thinking about would be Monte Cassino. Right? Now, Monte Cassino is a 6th century abbey established by Saint Benedict of Nursia. So by the time you get to World War II, it had been around for well over 1,000 years. Now, throughout the story of the Second World War, there are many different discussions to be had about the protection of cultural sites, the destruction of cultural sites, and not only, of course, the Holocaust against Jewish individuals, but also the cultural genocide that was taking place by the Nazis and others all around the world during the war. The Allies are a part of this discussion, too, when it comes to the question of what sites do they value, what sites do they not value, what is considered of military necessity, what isn't considered of military necessity. And the Monte Cassino Abbey was bombed by the Allies in 1944 as a part of the conflict. Now, there have been a lot of questions as to whether or not they needed to do so, and so understanding a bit about Monte Cassino, can kind of give us an inroads into this discussion point for the war. Thirdly is going to be Anzio. So Anzio was a landing and campaign that was intended to kind of speed up the Allied advance through Italy. And it took place beginning in early 1944, in January of 1944, and it lasted for nearly 6 months. The Allies did not have perhaps proper planning. They didn't really anticipate what was going to happen past the beachhead. And as a result, the Germans and others are very effective in putting together a defense against the Allies. And the Allied advance against the Germans was very slow going. I'd say times was very slow going. Now, this brings us to our 4th point, and that is the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. In Italy, the Allies deployed a number of different units that they were perhaps uninterested in or unwilling to deploy elsewhere. So this is where you're going to see a lot of international units fight. The Brazilian army is going to deploy here, but it's also where you're going to see the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. So this was a U.S. military unit made up entirely of individuals of Japanese ancestry, and they fought with distinction throughout this period in very heavy combat. They're the most decorated U.S. military unit during World War II. All right, now. Fifthly, a last major thing for us to think about would be the city of Rome. Now, the city of Rome has been fought over for centuries, since the days of the Roman Empire, but it was retaken by the Allies and liberated on the 5th of June, 1944. Now, the war in Italy isn't over after the retaking and liberation of Rome. But this was a clear sign of advancement and success for the Allies here. But of course, for the guys who were a part of that liberation, of course, the press the next day turned their attention to D-Day and the invasion of Normandy, so they perhaps didn't get as much media coverage as what they would have liked. All right. Thank you so much.